Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Bear Guys and 2T Fitness. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is a Star Wars edition. We're talking the first 3 episodes. Oh boy. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the happiest man on planet Earth, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Give him something, Tom.
We's are going home!
All right.
I wanted to find a quotable.
Well, that's right off the bat.
That would simultaneously capture my excitement about covering these films and also annoy you.
Oh,
I think I hit that brief.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I've got things to say.
Are you starting to come round on?
No.
No? Okay.
But I think
I walked into that one.
I think I'll be much kinder than I ever imagined I could have been.
Yeah.
Regarding Jar Jar specifically, that one character.
Okay. So you're talking about something that applies only to one movie, really.
He's in all 3.
No, he's not.
I'll say the right choice was made after that, but
oh, okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think it's any surprise to anyone who's listened to this podcast that I am more sympathetic to and forgiving of this trilogy than perhaps is the case with you. Perhaps not.
We'll see.
We'll see. But you represent the orthodoxy, and I represent the Martin Luther nailing a protest sign to your papal palace.
Yes, exactly right.
And I acknowledge that I'm in a minority when it comes to these films, and but I think it's a growing minority. I think
you might be right. Yeah. I think it's there might be a benefit of hindsight going on here with this particular trilogy.
Yeah.
And I'll I'm part of that. I think I have a lot of thinking to do, Tom.
Good.
I've done as much thinking as I possibly could until I got here.
Yeah.
And but I'm still unsure of what I'm going to do because obviously we're here to rank and declare for the episode 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
And you and I have a bit of history with these movies, kind of. On the fringes.
We've
I
tried
guess.
desperately not to talk about them to each other, knowing that this day would come.
Yeah, exactly.
We've also failed miserably in that task.
I blame you mostly. You'll say something, and then I'll say save it, or fuck that shit, or garbage.
Well,
we're letting our feelings
easy.
Be known.
It's one of the few. I think this is generally true of certainly this era of Lucasfilm, that I can mention anything from either the prequel trilogy or Crystal Skull and it will instantly annoy you, and that's just such low hanging fruit for me. It's really hard for me to.
If I were you, it would be hard to resist.
Because when we recently did the watch along of a young Indiana Jones TV movie, and all I had to say was, "What do you think happened to Mutt?" And your face just dropped, and that this solemn sigh. I saw your soul leave your body, and all I'd ask was a perfectly innocent timeline question.
You're right.
So I feel like I could I could just mention Sebulba and get the same reaction. Actually, I'd have to go.
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, on its face,
a lot of high-pitched cheering in these films.
Yeah, I would say you're right. I really had to confront a lot of my own prejudice.
Right. Well, that's what this trilogy is about, right?
Yeah,
This
my own
confronting
prejudice
your own
thoughts
demons.
about these first three movies, and I guess what really started making me, I started watching the Phantom Menace, and as I'm watching it, I've got plenty of stuff that we'll get to where this doesn't work.
I don't think I've
this and
taken more
that.
notes for
I
for any.
haven't.
You haven't taken any notes?
No, I haven't taken more notes for any three movies more than these three movies.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely. I mean, by a mile as well. It's not even
yeah.
close.
Yeah, me too.
Probably the closest was Empire Strikes Back and Jedi.
Right. But it was funny because as I was watching it, I did have to confront myself with the idea of, I've called worse movies than this good.
Sure. Yeah. So have I.
So what do I do with that information, sir?
Yeah. But
and,
it's I mean they come they come preloaded with a stigma that you have to wrap your head around in one way or another, right? You have to sort of kind of either confirmation bias or go the other way and just take them on their own merits or demerits.
Well, and there's, we've been talking lately an awful lot about meeting movies halfway.
Yeah. You
definitely
definitely have to meet these movies halfway.
Yeah, you have to.
You have to do a lot of the intellectual work before you start watching them.
Before you go in, right. And when you're watching a George Lucas movie of this era, you have to realize that it's a visual, almost just visual pleasure you could be searching for. If you come into these three Star Wars movies looking for great dialogue, you're going to be plenty pissed.
Okay. I'd like to occasionally challenge that preconception. You're not entirely wrong. I don't think you're entirely right.
I'm mostly right.
I appreciate what you're saying.
I'm like 85 to 90% right.
Yeah, like visual pleasure is the key. Definitely the key to these films. Visual, I'd say, like visual and non-verbal audio pleasure.
Okay, yeah.
Those are definitely because who is editing the sound. It's you've still got Ben Burt there working his magic, and that makes a huge difference. There are certainly moments in these films where, like as we saw with the original trilogy, Ben Burt's sound design just comes into its own.
And then on top of it, there's sort of this idea about there's two frame of minds for what this movie looks like visually.
Yeah.
And these movies have done something that I don't think can be denied and yet are still derided.
Okay.
And I think both are completely fair.
All right.
I think these movies pushed visual effects forward in a way in what we're dealing with today. Like this was the start of it.
Oh, yeah.
And yet the narrative for the people you were describing earlier, like me, was saying, it still looks like shit, guys. It doesn't look as good as you think it does. And a lot of that is true.
Yeah.
But I also think a lot of that is unfair. I'll cop to that.
These films are a testament to what you can do when you're a filmmaker who doesn't want to go outside.
Exactly.
And will literally do anything to avoid that happening. By the end of Revenge of the Sith, George and I've recently, just in preparation, watched the making of documentaries for each of these films, which I have fascinating things to say about. By the end of it, it's literally like George Lucas never has to be outside a building.
Ever.
He's created an infrastructure around him. And as you say, for the entirety of cinema,
Mm-hmm.
that is solely about him not wanting to interact with people in an outdoor setting.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this is too early to bring this up, but it's one of my notes throughout all three movies. When they're outside and in a real place, I'm liking the movie. When they're inside and trying to tell me they're outside, I'm liking the movie less.
Sure.
That's me.
Yeah. And yeah, that definitely it's striking to return to the Phantom Menace after so many years and remember how practical it looked in retrospect
Right.
and how unreal and digital it seemed at the time.
Yes.
But even compared to the next two movies, which, let's face it, were, deliberately trying to make. I mean, Attack of the Clones is the first movie entirely shot on digital.
Digital, right.
And the only reason they didn't do that with Phantom Menace is they couldn't build the cameras fast enough to get it out on time. So that's a deliberate choice to make a
And you
film
can
in
see
that
it
way.
on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess the cutoff for most people is one of taste and art. Like it does this.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yes, you can do it, but should you? And does it lead to more creative and interesting filmmaking? And that's something I think the jury's out
Yeah,
on
but what do you
on the
say?
basis of these three films.
Yeah, because if you're looking through that angle or looking through that lens, if you're looking through that lens in judgment of these movies, you could have your argument could be a baseline. You could just flat out disregard it on that one basis.
Sure.
But when you look on, if you take it further down the line and see the influence that these movies had on everything we're watching today, then that's quite prophetic, and you have to kind of give them
Yeah.
credit, don't
It's
you?
it's also it's a little bit of a it can be a smokescreen for evaluating these movies in their own right as well, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot easier to like more recent Star Wars movies that have found a way to integrate practical and digital
Yeah.
in a more effective way. Does that mean they're better stories? Does that mean the performances are better? That it looks, sounds better? No, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. You know,
And I mean,
are they as interesting? They might,
right.
they might be more experimental in a way that's not particularly pleasurable.
The funny part too is how long it's been.
Since you've seen
I
them.
mean, no, I mean
Oh, since
since
they
they
came out.
were made.
Yeah, last
You know
century,
the Yeah, exactly. Starting last
last
century,
millennia.
almost 25 years
Mm-hmm.
since the first movie, and more than 15 years since the third movie.
Yeah.
And they feel so much more forefront in my mind in terms of where they are in a timeline
Well, we've had a
that
whole nother Star Wars trilogy since,
since exactly.
with space for a kind of a couple a
So a
sort
bunch
of
of
a
spin-offs, yeah.
subcouplet of movies and an infinite supply of Disney Plus TV series. So
Yeah.
they did all that post 2015, but if you spread it thinly over the 23 years, the 24 years since this movie came out, since the Phantom Menace came out, then that's quite a lot of content in the Star
Right.
Wars franchise to
It really is.
have followed these movies. And for a time, it certainly looked like I mean, and certainly when you watch Revenge of the Sith, the movie itself seems to play this way, that it's going to be the last ever Star Wars movie,
Mm-hmm.
like we thought with Return
With
of the Jedi.
Jedi. Yeah.
And that movie told us,
Right.
both in what happened on screen and off screen. Same thing here.
And then George went for the bags of money.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's another way in which these movies grow in retrospect, because they are the vision of one person.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something you absolutely cannot say about any Star Wars since.
Right.
But it's true here to a fault.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Like when I rewatch The Phantom Menace, quality aside, at the end of it, I always think the same thing. Is like, this is one of the most authored movies I've ever seen. I've never seen a movie
Mm-hmm.
that is more representative of
Of one single person,
one
right?
person's imagination,
Yeah.
for better or worse. And then the next two movies, it's like he's like Gollum just fighting against himself.
Right.
There's, it's like he's like howling Mad Murdoch with his left, trying to control his left hand from hitting him in the face. It's
I want some trash bags.
it's this clones and Sith are schizophrenic movies, but Phantom Menace is. So there's even distinctions within the trilogy that are quite interesting, and even Lucas himself, I think, has come out and said, Phantom Menace is my, I don't think he used these words, but my Citizen Kane. It was where I had full control, and no one was stopping me from doing. And again, he didn't put it in these terms, but we can read between the lines. No one was stopping me from doing anything I wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, even it's funny because you and I were talking, we've talked several times about the documentary about ILM.
Yeah.
And, the building up of the effects for the Star Wars movies and, obviously into Jurassic Park and, everything that ILM has done. But when you watch that documentary, you have this sense that there were other people in the room that were willing to say, well, I don't think that's going to look as good as you want to. Let's not do it. And at that time, he might have listened.
Yeah.
But like you said, in these first 3 episodes, this guy is doing whatever the fuck he wants, however the fuck he wants to do it, and you can see all of that on screen. They're his movies.
If the behind the scenes footage for these movies is anything to go by, there are more people telling him to do something, and he is also listening less to them.
Yeah, right.
As it goes on. So that combination of, these movies are already being made by committee, but like 99% of what the committee says is being dismissed instantly.
Yes, sir. Oh, okay. I thought you meant like...
No, I mean, like, no, people are coming.
Is that happening often, or is it more of a yes, sir kind of a thing? I mean, good idea, sir.
There's definitely a pattern of go away and, whether it's the creation of a character or a vehicle or a set or something, go away, come up with the most amazing ideas. The sky's the limit. They do.
Right.
They bring back hundreds of sketches, and George Lucas is like, yeah, I like this one. So, like, most of their work is pointless.
Right.
And also, he tends to be narrowing in on the strangest of the bunch, something that only he understands why he picked it. So it's a weird combination. The movie making is getting bigger, but the direction is getting smaller.
There's a certain element that maybe feels like Bluto from Animal House. He's like, was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Germans? Yeah. Forget it. He's rolling. And I think everybody working with George Lucas was like, forget it. He's rolling.
Yeah.
Let's do the floppy ears.
The only department that seems to have any autonomy on these films is the costume department. They seemingly are allowed to go hog wild with whatever they do, whatever they want to do, and that really shows in the movies themselves. I mean, this is like the less elaborate costuming in some operas,
right?
I mean,
for background characters,
right? Exactly.
Just sitting in bars,
right? Yeah. So these are fascinating objects, and they've earned a reappraisal, I think. If only because
they got one from me.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's because of the Star Wars that came after this, and how that might change your feelings about this. or whether time has just made audiences want to consider it differently. I don't know.
I think part of that has to do with, as it's weird. You can watch, speaking specifically about effects.
Yeah.
Because you can watch a movie in 2023 and there are still moments with digital effects where you think, well, that didn't look too good.
Hmm.
And so if you're thinking that now,
whole movies, in fact.
yeah.
Maybe some movies that I've seen quite recently. Go on.
Yeah. But when you're thinking that now and looking back at what Lucas did then,
yeah,
you almost have to give him a break. And I think much
I did not
of the
think
shit
this is not the way I thought this was going to go.
I think so much of the shit he took had to do with the look of his films. And watching them now, I have to give him a bit of a break on that point.
Yeah. Are you giving him a break because you like him, or are you giving him a break because it seems so intentional?
I think a little bit of both.
Oh.
Yeah.
This might be an interesting, if somewhat disappointing for me, conversation, because I just thought I was going to keep throwing Lucasfilm IP at you and you would just crumble. But I guess you found a way to deflect those
Get
pot
that
shots.
shit out of my face, sir.
Well, yeah, I think...
But there's because obviously we're here to rank and declare. There's that other part of me, Tom, that says, yeah, I might stick to my guns out of spite. I like spite.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm like Jerry
once
Seinfeld.
You hear what I have to say, you'll have no choice but to take the spite option. I'm gonna Mike Shan's Harry Potter you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, this is your Harry Potter, right?
Well, that was actually the Twilight Saga, and then you enjoyed it far too much for it to so. But I mean, it's just a bonus because we always knew we were going to work our way through the Star Wars films.
Sure.
Because it's one of the biggest sequel franchises in the world,
in the history of film. Yeah.
So we have no choice. And this is in terms of we covered. Well, we started with the Star Wars Holiday Special, which
yeah.
There's a lot of
Who would do that?
A lot of cross-contamination. A lot of cross-contamination, I think, between the prequels and that, more than any other Star Wars property. But we have, and again, Solo, which I see a lot of cross-pollination there too. But then we eventually got to the Star Wars movies proper and the original trilogy, and we were both perfectly content with that trio of movies.
Sure.
Also known as a trilogy. I don't know why I said trio.
Means the same thing.
There's a word for that, Tom. It's called trilogy. And so it's like we found like a finite point of contentment.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that comes from now on is going to breach that sense of finality, and that has to be taken as. And so I guess you either embrace the fact that they're making more Star Wars movies, or you continue to fight against how it's diluting that perfect triumvirate. There we go. And there's another try word.
Hey. Look at you.
I have two different synonyms for one word. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you a couple of questions right off the bat.
Oh God.
First question, how long it had been since you saw the trilogy, these first three movies?
I watch it all the time, Mike.
Okay. You said something earlier that made me think you weren't watching it as frequently as I thought you were, and I'm happy to report to my own brain that you do watch it as much as I thought you did.
I frequently marathon all the Star Wars movies. I kind of put them on continuously, and it's easier for me because there isn't that huge gap in quality that other people see. Not that they necessarily fit together very well, but it's all for me. It's all part of this. At least up until the end of Revenge of the Sith, it's all part of the same peer into George Lucas's brain.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that point, you don't get that quality to it.
Well, easy with how you use the word quality.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, exactly. Using quality in the descriptive sense.
I know what you meant.
You don't get that character. That characteristic leaves the Star Wars franchise
Yeah.
at that point. And I'm very attracted to the idea that this one guy did these 6 films,
Mm-hmm.
and that they represent different parts of how he sees the world and how he
But I
tells
also think it's important
stories.
to remember he didn't direct 2 of those movies. And so there was another voice in the room. In the original,
Well,
because for 5 and 6. But
yeah,
he's obviously a heavy voice in the room.
mm,
And I think he certainly was probably
yeah,
starting to steer the car more for Jedi.
hmm hmm
But he seemed to let Kirshner do what he wanted to do
yeah,
with
and he's
Empire, and
not willing to let go for these
yeah,
movies.
yeah.
Only a little bit with the writing, I think, of Clones and
Mm-hmm.
Sith. I think there are other writers on that, but
I still remember a story about the story I heard in 1999 was he called up Lawrence Kasdan and said, "Listen, I'm about to start shooting the Phantom Menace. You want to take a pass at this script?" And he said, "Well, what do you mean about to start shooting? How much time?" And he goes, 2 weeks. And he goes, "No, George, I'm not going to look at your
yeah,
script
it was
over
very
2 weeks. That's
that whole
ridiculous."
production was very skin of the teeth.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that made it. It's an official Lucasfilm making of documentary. It's on all the DVDs, and
Mm-hmm.
it does indicate that they ran out of time and were over ambitious, and they didn't get the cut of the movie that they wanted.
Hmm.
Which is just, it's fascinating to me that such a, mind you, this again, this is prophetic of how movies are now. It's amazing to me that such a big movie that's had so much time and resources pumped into it,
Mm-hmm.
that there's ever a chance that like it's not even going to make it to the screen because it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
The elements just don't work. And yet this happens again and again, and now we're at a point where some movies don't even, they start production and they never leave it. They never even get released.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like huge movies that never seen the light of day. And the Phantom Menace, it looks like it could have almost been one of those.
It's crazy.
Except George Lucas is totally independent at this point, right? He's not beholden to anyone.
Yeah, no.
So
And it's funny because a lot of that
he put it out
was so
anyway.
fortuitous to him because of what went down with Star Wars.
Yeah,
Because that first movie wasn't believed in. He said, "Let me have complete and total creative control. I won't take any money from my
mm,
for a fee, and then having to resign out of the Directors Guild and all this shit. Like all of
yeah.
that led to him being able to kind of do whatever the fuck he wanted for these movies.
And that, again, as with everything in these movies, that independence is both a curse and a blessing.
Yeah,
There are times when it makes these better movies, there's times when it makes them worse movies.
agreed. All right, second question.
Oh, God.
Watching, well, maybe this is since you do watch them a lot. Maybe this question has no relevance for you, but watching it for the purposes of this podcast, did
Yeah.
any opinions change? Any surprises in terms of ranking, good, bad, any of that?
No, I mean, to paraphrase Emperor Palpatine, as we find out he's called in this trilogy.
Eventually.
Um, it's the most open secret in any film ever.
I know.
But they refuse to say it. They refuse
Mm-hmm.
to ever reveal it.
So you think the hood is just doing all the work, do you? In the holograms? Like we don't know who it is?
No,
All right.
I don't. But they flatly refuse.
Well, I was speaking to the movies, not you. But...
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely, yeah. No, I get that it's Palpatine.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm not that deep in the hole when it comes to love of these movies.
All right.
I can't suspend that level of disbelief. What was the question?
Any opinions change?
Oh, so to quote,
or surprises for
to
you?
quote Emperor Palpatine, my feelings are entirely clear on this matter.
Okay.
But it's not really a but I thought I I thought I had one of these films pegged, and I'm slightly reconsidering the firmness of my position on it.
Hmm.
But it's only really to do with good or bad. My ranking has always been clear in my mind.
Okay. Well, then, before we start ranking,
I should ask you the same question because it won't surprise anyone to hear me say that. But you've said the most surprising thing so far on this episode.
I
So,
think I came in with an idea
to
of
this recording, or before you sat down and watched them?
before I sat down to watch them.
Okay.
I had one kind of, I think, a revelation in terms of surprise of what movie's at the top of my list and why it is.
Oh my god! I need to bring out Augie's Municipal Band. Is this it's a celebration?
Like, I'm still in the midst of gut-wrenching decisions in terms of how good or bad I think these movies are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, stay tuned. Maybe 10 or 11 minutes from now.
Don't skip ahead, though.
Right.
Because you'll miss confirmation of your opinion of what I was going to say.
Okay. Let's rank.
Let's do it. I think
you want to go first. Or do you want me to go first?
I did. Now I'm intrigued. Oh, what's top of your list? I think that little teaser there, that little a teaser not unlike the one from the Phantom Menace, which got us all excited before crushing us horribly when we actually saw the film. Well, I still contend there's one or two moments in that trailer that are as effective in the movie itself, but literally one or two moments.
Okay. First of all, let's talk about an overall narrative. Like, we'll get to each movie individually, but say in aggregate from all reviewers, these movies jump. They keep jumping. Phantom Menace at the bottom, Attack of the Clones, and then up top is Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, interesting. Does not reflect the fan consensus about those movies now.
You don't think so? Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, I know so. I listen to enough Star Wars kind of podcasts and read enough articles to know which of these movies is now at the top and which is at the bottom. And it's Attack of the Clones is probably the most loathed Star Wars movies in all of Star Wars fandom. And Phantom Menace is the majority of fans' preferred trilogy film.
Well, funny you should say that. Coming into it, I did not think that this was going to happen, but having watched all three and thinking about the narrative for each three, for me, the most successful of these three movies, despite all of its problems, is The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
I think it's the best of these three movies.
You've told me that before, though.
I have?
Yeah. So you must have thought that, unthought it, and then thought it again. Which, if you're going to do that with any movie, I understand why it would be The Phantom Menace you would do that with.
Well, I remember thinking, upon first seeing
I'm surprised that you're surprised that that's at the top of your list.
Why?
To me, it just seems when you generally don't like these movies, Phantom Menace seems the one that's easiest to rationalize as the best of the three. Because it is so singular, it is so its own thing compared to the other two.
Yeah, it really is.
That you could convince yourself that it's more of a, that it stands above the others, that it's more of a work of art because it just seems uncontaminated in a way that the other two don't.
That's the way I look at it. And I'll tell you the thing that I think this movie has far and above the other two. Each of these movies has a first act in the neighborhood of an hour, a second act anywhere from, 40 minutes to 50 minutes, and then an hour to an hour and a half second act. And those acts in 2 and 3, they meander, they go on too long. One has a central story that I could care less about. This one has a second act. What's that?
You're on your own there. Carry on.
Okay. This one has a second act.
To quote Luke, I care.
That I think this is the best part of the movie, and that's the Phantom Menace.
I might agree with you there in terms of the second act. What do you consider to be the second act? It's difficult to tell in a Lucas screenplay. So what have you guessed that the second act of the movie is?
In the Phantom Menace, it's the second they leave Naboo and get to Tatooine.
Oh.
And meet Annie and...
So that's the part of the movie you like?
No, I mean, there's things I like throughout, but...
But you think it has the strongest second act starting with Tatooine?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify because I think I agree with you there.
Okay.
About, not the whole thing, but about... I was... From the very first moment I saw Phantom Menace, I thought, this feels like it's on safest ground when it's on Tatooine.
Mm-hmm.
And those are I think the most compelling scenes in the movie for various reasons, but we'll talk about that.
I think not all, but I think a majority of the best stuff is in that second act.
Yeah, I agree.
I
think it's as soon as they leave Naboo, actually, but again, we'll break that down. Yeah.
Yeah. I also think there's a lot to be said for having one extra really strong actor in your movie.
Oh.
So when you...
Are you talking about an extra, like...
No, you're going to have Ewan McGregor in all three movies,
okay.
And he is a strong actor. But when you add Liam Neeson, it matters, Like,
interesting.
It's important, I think.
Because
I consider Natalie Portman a fine actor, but this is not her best work in these movies. I would go so far as to say she's not very good.
I definitely like her more in one of these movies than the other two.
Okay.
And it is not The Phantom Menace.
Me either.
Interesting. That's a lot of food for thought. Anything else to say about why it's the top of the list?
I'll keep it for now.
Okay.
What is at the top of your list, sir?
I see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, that's if you don't appreciate all of these movies, that is definitely the best rationalization in how to rank them.
Mm.
But I do appreciate these movies.
Right.
But I appreciate these movies in a very specific way, which is that they're all... Everything after Return of the Jedi never needed to be made. Probably shouldn't have been made. So, all of these, everything
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, one of my... This is the frustrating part about watching these movies, back then and now. Yeah. I can't help but think, these movies don't need a lot. Just adjust this. Just tune that. These could be great movies if you gave a shit about human emotion. Don't, George Lucas.
If you're already frustrated by that, please don't read the draft screenplay of The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
Because they ignored every good choice that was in that screenplay.
All right.
Anyway, so basically, I don't really care. I've got no skin in the game. Everything from the beginning of these movies is on a level pegging for me. It's up to them to impress me.
Okay.
But my preference, given that, I would be happy for these films not to exist at all, is that if they do exist, that they be a riff on some kind of genre fiction.
Right. That's a thing.
And
for you. Like that.
And that's why Solo is probably my favorite non-original trilogy Star Wars film, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a riff on the heist movie,
Right.
like very clearly, and I appreciate that about it. So top of my list is a film that I see and I've always seen as George Lucas's love letter to Pulp Fiction. Whether there's monster movies, film noir, espionage thrillers, romantic melodrama,
Hmm.
and it's also a film. It's also the only film in this trilogy that feels like it came out of the world in which it was released as a movie, both societally and in terms
Hmm.
of technology, in terms of pop culture. Feels like it's influenced by something beyond itself.
Okay. Any
And
chance you tell me what it is?
that movie is the Attack of the Clones.
Oh, I'm really
Perhaps
excited you said that.
perhaps the most derided movie in Star Wars fandom.
Okay.
And I really I've never understood that. I've always enjoyed it perfectly well, but I appreciate it on that level, and on the on the level of it's it's an anti-war film at a time when it was unfashionable to be an anti-war film in Hollywood, and that's what I mean about Lucas's
Mm.
independence cutting both ways. Sometimes it's a
Yeah.
blessing, sometimes it's a curse. Here's a
Sure.
blessing. He came out and sort of said in the run up to Afghanistan and Iraq, this is immoral, this is undemocratic what you're doing, and he
Right.
did it through a piece of a piece of uh, mainstream pop culture.
Film. Yeah. Right.
Perhaps one of the biggest movies of the year has that sentiment in it. So that's why it's top of the list.
Well, I got to tell you,
Mm, please do.
like this close
Oh, interesting.
to the top of my list.
Now that surprises me.
And I thought that was the even bigger surprise for me
Mm,
cuz I think I think I had this idea in my head that what you said about popular culture about
mm,
how they regard Attack of the Clones.
yeah.
And in the mid, like, maybe about halfway through that movie, I thought, I'm kind of digging this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Like, what's everybody's problem?
It's
And
yeah.
I don't know. There was, I reacted so much more favorably to that movie than I ever thought I was going to. I
Mm,
really surprised me because
yeah.
I had to sit down and think for a hard second. Is this the top?
Mm,
And I thought, I mean, kind of for the reasons I stated earlier, I don't know, there's something, Phantom Menace just feels like a Star Wars movie to me, God damn it.
oh my
I like
god,
that.
but that's huge. But that's not something you hear that often. In fact, you hear exactly the opposite all the time.
Oh, I don't think so.
But that was the main complaint. It doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie.
No, it feels way more like a Star Wars movie than the other two.
That's so interesting that 24 years later
Mm-hmm.
we feel okay about saying that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because I don't know if I feel that way necessarily. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
looking at these in any kind of uh in any comparison with the original trilogy, because it's in it, it's on its own level for me.
Right.
So I mean, we're gonna have to, even before the end of this episode, we might have to re-rank, but
Yeah, right.
it won't be very interesting because this is an entirely separate entity for me.
Okay.
I'm only at the moment I'm only comparing them to each other. Once we
Mm-hmm.
factor in the sequels, it'll get interesting. Believe you me. But right now, when we're just judging them against itself and the original trilogy, not that interesting. The ranking's just going to stay the same for me.
Yeah.
But
And when you're doing a trilogy and you have a middle movie,
mm,
we talked about this with Empire. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to tell the middle story of a trilogy.
yeah, and I'm continually surprised, especially comparing it to what has been said about the movie, that
Mm-hmm.
it does some of that work really well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is a flawless movie.
No,
I
of course not.
understand. it's imperfect. There's this whole scenes and sequences that simply don't work.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was the storytelling travesty that, or the characterization travesty that people said it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's actually doing it. It laid the groundwork for a lot of that. I think the problem is the next movie didn't take the hint.
You're right. Yeah.
Didn't
Didn't
run
pick it
with
up.
any of it. I think that's the problem. I think they were actually laying the groundwork rather nicely in ways that that, as you say, are very entertaining as well as
Yeah.
compelling. And then, Revenge of the Sith is trying to tell its own story, which doesn't really have anything to do with what we've seen before.
Yeah.
Which was a strange choice. Always seemed a strange choice to me.
Well, I'll save it for
Yeah.
Sith. I'll save it for Sith, but
save it for Sith.
So, I mean, we have my first two. What is,
Well, it's the.
Where are you on the Phantom Menace Sith?
Yeah, Phantom Menace is absolutely the next, the number
Okay.
two for me, number two spot for me, but it's not as close. I think for me, Attack of the Clones runs away with it. My feelings, but the reason why Phantom Menace is second is, I think it's such a great piece of world building.
Mm-hmm.
Like, internal world building. The internal world building in this film is fabulous. I think there are some absolutely outstanding sequences and scenes in the film as well on a technical level.
On a technical level, that movie has the best scene out of all three, for sure.
Yep, that's probably right. We might not be thinking of the same one, but I think I think in general
I'm thinking of the pod
agree
race.
with you.
I'm thinking of the pod race.
Then it might be then we might have the same example. It's certainly
good.
it's close between the pod race and one other sequence in that film, for me. But I can't give it top spot, and not for the reasons that, well, maybe for the reasons that it's so disliked. But for me, what I've never been able to get on board with is the idea that this is the first movie in a trilogy.
Yeah. Okay.
This they didn't have the concept of it at the time, but whenever I watch this film, I think this would have been the best Star Wars story movie ever made. Because it has such a standalone quality, and it's so tangential to the Skywalker saga.
Yes.
There was like 2 plot points that affect the rest of the next 5 movies in this film, and the rest of it is just world building and storytelling within this fictional universe that they're creating really well. And that's what I've never been able to kind of wrap my head around in terms of this movie. That's what holds it back from top spot in this trilogy for me.
Okay.
It's everything that's happening is so low stakes, and even when it's high stakes, it doesn't read that way.
I could say that about almost everything that's happening in all these movies. I could argue about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of, you can sort of think around that a little bit. But in the end, at the end of the movie, you go, well, really 1 or 2 things happened that will affect the rest of the saga.
Sure.
But everything, the stakes are high in relation to the internal logic of the movie.
Yeah, right.
But if you try and think around that, it gets very
right.
it all seems very small potatoes. And the pod race is the perfect example of that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, right.
You think this is way more important than it actually is.
Right. We just need a part.
Right. We need a part to fool this guy into giving us the thing that I don't even believe you couldn't fix by yourself anyway.
Yeah.
That's number 2. Number 2 on my list, and it's a high note. I have a lot of high regard for it, but I just, as a part of the trilogy, I think it's severely lacking.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. You Yeah, I guess you can blame the movie for that. I mean, it is part of a trilogy, so okay, fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they, if they'd have sold this as a prequel to the trilogy, and then Attack of the Clones had been the first movie in the trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
I think I think this would have been, or if it was just kind of released as like an interim Star Wars film that was just about establishing what's going on within the fictional universe of Star Wars at this point in its history, I think it would have worked magnificently.
Okay.
And as it is, it works pretty well. I just think that's a misstep that's hard to look past sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, right. And so Sith goes to the bottom of both of our lists.
Yeah.
Which is funny considering it's the highest rated movie in these first three.
It's such a non-movie to me.
Yeah.
Like I know that's been said about all these movies, but this one really hits.
It's more of a non-movie than the other ones to me.
Yeah, it's like one giant set piece, and then the rest of it is just tying up loose ends.
Right, and the movie feels
ships taking off and landing, which eats up about 30 minutes of the film.
Right, and then on top of that, they have to have the big reveal. That's not a reveal for the audience, but they're going to have the big reveal.
Yeah.
And the movie feels very unsure about how, when, where, why to do that. We get the Emperor in earnest after a lightning accident.
I think earnest is the worst possible adjective you could use in relation to Emperor Palpatine. Oh, I'm so frail.
Yeah.
Oh, please don't let him kill me. Which, by the way, I'm all over. Love it.
Okay, good.
Love it.
But we get that like an hour into the movie.
But there's nothing in between the first and the third act except spaceships taking off and landing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Space filler, right? That's what it is. And it's just it's like it's almost as if, they were like, well, they got to a point where they were like, well, we all know how it ends, right? Mm-hmm. So let's just get there.
I know, but
like,
it takes
it
takes a good hour and 25 minutes to get there.
Right, but it's like it doesn't. When you first find Anakin at the beginning of the film, he's the most heroic he's ever been. It's like, why would you reset him to that? That makes your work in turning into a villain even harder. He was really going in the direction of villain before this, and you've reset him to this kind of war hero.
Yeah,
and that's not to say, but I've already said that there's definitely aspects of it I really like.
Me too.
Think it might have the best dramatic scene in the whole trilogy. And everyone, I would say one of the criticisms that I generally agree with about the Phantom Menace is that it does have a wooden quality to it. It doesn't feel like the actors are really embodying any of the roles. And by the time we get to Sith, like the legacy characters have started to get comfortable, especially Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
Who's just he's just strolling through this film.
He's very winning in the role. But I'll also say, I'll save it for the episodes.
Ian McDermott, and not he puts a foot wrong in any of these films, but just that he just
hanging off balconies and cackling with laughter.
Yeah. And one of my favorite moments in this trilogy is the moment in which he's gone full Emperor. And he's kind of shaking off the last, 20 years of deception. He's going, like that. It's like what an amazing choice. It's like you can see the last 20 years of this, this long con. Kind of, he just shakes it off.
Just being shaken off like a dog in a bath.
Exactly. So and then some of the supporting performances are really good as well, and even some of the one-scene characters.
I think it's the best Natalie Portman is in the series. Is in that movie.
I'm not too. I don't think it's her fault, but I'm not too keen on her in this movie. But she's got again.
I'm not too
got,
keen on her in any of the movies, but I think
yeah.
it's the best work she's doing in the three
Okay.
movies.
I think
But I
Clones,
agree
I
with
think she's much better
you.
in Clones.
Across the board, I don't blame any of the actors for that. I blame George. And
That's your T-shirt.
I I have so much to say on the subject.
Yeah.
There are baffling choices made in these movies that
and speaking
hamstring the rest of the. Anyway, I'll keep it.
Well, having said that, I think the performances look more comfortable than earlier on in the trilogy. I will say I do think the worst version of everything in this trilogy is in this film, for me.
Mm. Okay.
The worst villain, the worst dialogue, it kind of, that's what I've never understood about people's hatred of Attack of the Clones. I don't say they attack it, but the reasons why every time I watch watch this trilogy, I think your beef is with Revenge of the Sith. It's not with Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm.
It's what Revenge of the Sith did with all of this that's the problem.
Okay.
It really isn't and in my head, I wonder whether people forget what's in what movie sometimes, because it's so clear to me sometimes when I'm watching Revenge.
Could you blame them?
It's so clear to me when I watch Revenge of the Sith, when they attack Hayden Christensen's and Natalie Portman's acting, we're like, that's all this movie. That's got nothing to do with Attack of the Clones. They're putting so much more energy and life into that movie than they did in this.
We'll see.
Some good action in it too, which is never to be sniffed at in a Star Wars movie. And again, the more you learn, the more you go behind the scenes and you see how Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen prepared for that duel at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there's no digitalization of them. Everything around them is digitalized, obviously, but the speed at which they are fighting is the speed at which they are fighting.
Right. But I have notes that say too fast. Or at least maybe not but again, shot well.
It's a deliberate choice. George is literally they're going faster, more intense.
Yeah.
And they were like, there's and his idea of that is, how fast was it in the last film? Go faster.
Yeah.
That's what he means by faster, more intense. It's a miles. He's a car guy. It's a miles per hour issue.
Yeah, right? Yeah, totally. So now confronted with good bad. I mean, it was a real punch to the face for me to say. I almost feel as though I have to call each of them good.
You came so close.
Each of them bad.
You nearly kneeled to me. Nearly got you down there. And then you suddenly remembered that you were a good guy. And that I couldn't cure death.
Right, yes.
Although, gotta say,
it's all just a facade.
In light of later Star Wars movies,
yeah, right.
Like Palpatine was onto something.
He apparently he knew something we didn't know then.
It wasn't all bluster.
Yeah.
Somehow he knew.
Oh, man. Sometimes I look over my notes and I think I already have to change my mind on my ranking.
What's making you change your mind?
Seeing C-3PO and R2-D2. There's no reason for these two to be in this movie. Any of these movies.
From my point of view, that's a good choice.
It's such an asshole.
No, I mean, listen, I'm not going to gloss over the problems of these movies.
All right.
That's not my mandate. It's only implied in my mandate.
Are you calling all three good?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Thought we could just start easy.
No. No, you're gonna have to. That's why. Hey, that's why we call it declaring.
I don't know that I'm willing to declare any of these movies good, Tom. They've got so many fucking problems.
Agreed.
It's so frustrating. Being confronted with thinking that they might be good officially.
Yeah, that's it.
Fucking
I mean, once you
fuck.
say it, it's forever will it forever, forever will it dominate your destiny. And that's Puppet Yoda saying that, not that digital Yoda.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Go along with it. Save myself, I might.
I see. I think we're in the same boat, which is we're both
Yeah.
coming from we both have irreconcilable differences about these
Hmm.
movies.
Right.
You want to give it the good grace of giving a break to one of these movies as being good, whereas I want to try and introduce a note of objectivity and say that one of these movies is bad.
Bad.
Yeah, but in reality, we would both happily say blanket good or bad.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, like I say, there's one of these movies that I think is significantly worse than the other two, and
That's Sith.
yeah, I Sith for me is a bad movie in that it is not a movie like the other two.
See, I am actually closer to bookending bads with Phantom Menace and Sith and calling Clones a good movie, despite Menace being
Oh,
at
I
the
like
top of
that.
my list.
That sounds like something I would have done at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
I think I did that with Back to the Future.
Oh.
Oh, go with your gut. Your insights serve you well. Again, none of these quotes are from the actual movies, which I think says something about the
I
quality
know.
of
You're
dialogue in this.
picking shit
Like,
from You're picking shit from the stuff we already covered.
and then sometimes I hear a line of dialogue, go, "Ooh, that's good." Oh, they're quoting the original trilogy. Okay.
Yeah. Um Oh, I want to defer and wait.
Well, something we could do while you make your mind up is,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a pointless exercise, but re-ranking. None of these beat any of the original trilogy movies for you, right?
No.
No, for me neither.
And they're not even close for me.
No, on an island all of their own.
Yeah.
They're on George
That's
Lucas
actually
Island.
that's an interesting way to look at it. If
Yeah,
if these movies were on their own and completely unrelated to anything else I'd seen, I'm more in favor
you'd still
of.
know it was Palpatine.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
That's another way to think about it. Like even for first time viewers,
But you
who
see
are
what
you
I mean?
fooling?
Because that's one of the mistakes of the movie. That's
Yeah.
why are you holding that out like it's a secret to us? It's
But
not.
it's also why Sith is the worst of the bunch, and why it's not a good movie is that it has to be compared to the original trilogy in a way the first two don't.
Mm.
And so it's easier to buy into the pleasures that the first couple of movies are providing you, whereas a Sith wants you to see it as essentially a prequel to New Hope,
To New Hope, right?
or Star Wars to give it its correct and proper name. But
That's the other thing.
but if we
I
just
could
say
call
Star
these.
Wars, people won't know what we're talking about.
I know. I could call these movies bad just based on their unwieldy titles.
Well,
Just call them
they're
The
flagrant.
Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. But when you say Star Wars, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, I want to write you off. Those are the official titles.
My objection to the titles is different.
Okay.
Is that they're all flagrantly untrue. They are not a description of what happens in the movie.
There's no attack from the clones.
All three.
They're helping you.
And I think someone online sort of said if you swapped around the titles of the movie, would it be a better title? And every time it was.
Oh yeah.
Like if you called, I think specifically if you renamed retitled Attack of the Clones: The Phantom Menace, it makes way more sense because there's more of a Phantom Menace in that movie than there is in the
Right.
Phantom Menace. There's also no menace in the Phantom Menace.
And there's not really a Phantom because I think they think Palpatine's the Phantom.
Oh, I think so. I think someone said quite rightly that Phantom Menace should be called Revenge of the Sith, because at one point,
right,
the Sith say, "We will take our revenge."
Right.
So not only is it a better title, they say the title in the movie.
In the movie.
Which, as we know, is how you know it's a good title.
Yeah.
There's also it's also incorrect on another level, which is that there are no wars in these Star Wars movies.
Right. Well,
no, not on screen.
No, not on screen. But spoken of,
there's wars between two of them.
There's
the first two films are set before war. They're Star pre-wars. I'm serious. I'm not even joking.
You're right. But there's wars going on.
No.
At the start of 3.
But it's ending. That's all happened before we started.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, to call that a war when both sides are the same, nobody's fighting anybody. It's the same person running both sides. Anyway. But what are you going to say? I've given you enough time, surely, now.
All 3 are bad.
Okay. So, you were not willing...
I'm not.
Really?
I'm sorry, there's just too many mistakes in these movies. And when I see what they could be, because I think there's bones and structure in each of these movies to make them really good movies, maybe possibly great movies.
Well, steady on then.
But there are just too many mistakes, and there's
That was a quote. I wasn't even trying to quote for one of these movies. Steady now, steady.
Yeah, I think he gets in his own way.
Oh no, no argument there. I think if you're judging the movies on that, Attack of the Clones is clearly the worst and a bad movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have never seen a clearer example of someone getting in their own way, to the point where I suspect there are 2 George Lucases who, are trying to get through a doorway but literally can't get out of each other's way to do it. I'm interested you saying, though, that the closest to good for you is Attack of the Clones. I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by the whole idea that people who see this movie secretly like it but can't admit to themselves that they like it. And I always wonder what's holding them back. So I'm so curious because,
part of what I've always liked about that movie, it speaks to what you were saying, before about movies disguising themselves as genre movies, because a portion of this story feels like a noir to me.
Yeah.
When
no, it is a noir.
When Obi-Wan goes off on his little Scooby-Doo adventure, I'm thrilled.
I mean,
the funny part is that for so much of it, nothing's going on. There is nothing really truly happening, but I feel a sense of dread around him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so I have to give credit to Lucas for creating that.
And also,
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it kind of reminds me of The Third Man sometimes.
Yeah, that's definitely the territory that he's pulling from. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well, and you again seeing this through the prism of the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV series.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout that, I was thinking, I want this to be Obi-Wan Private Eye. I want this to be the Rockford Files with Obi-Wan.
Right.
And the closest they've ever got to that is in Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And it really works, that formula. And so, to me, as someone who, likes genre TV more than apparently anyone who works in television does anymore, I think that is just the obvious way to go. It's almost a no-brainer. You wouldn't consider doing anything else with Obi-Wan. He's going around Tatooine solving people's problems.
Yeah.
It's just The Fugitive, but it's on Tatooine.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And it's like, we know it's gonna work because they did it in Attack of the... Maybe that... Well, knowing Lucasfilm and the distance they want to
Right.
create
Maybe.
between past
Yeah.
properties that fans don't like, that's probably exactly why they didn't do it.
That's funny.
As Alex Robinson
All
in
right.
Star Wars Minute said, they are gutless cowards, and I agree.
So, are you going to call them both good or just clones good?
Oh, it's a good question. I think Phantom Menace has, for me, more problems than Clones, which is not an opinion you often hear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel it's I'm obsessed with this idea that of fandom picking the wrong battles, and to me, there's no clearer example of that than Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones, right?
Like it was clearly a movie that was made more for them than the Phantom Menace, and yet it's the one they resent more. I don't understand. I really do. I genuinely don't. I genuinely don't understand. Like when you look back at it, you're like, Lucas didn't need to pander to you in this way, and clearly he doesn't want to, because he does certain things in Attack of the Clones that makes it very clear he's angry about what you said about Phantom Menace. I, but I'd say Attack of the Clones is definitely a good film. I find the Phantom Menace overall middling,
Mm-hmm.
because its problems, the problems of what it is, and what it is internally versus what it is externally,
Mm-hmm.
don't really jibe. But yeah, I think it's a good movie.
All right.
I mean, it's a good movie.
Good for you. I mean, not good for you because you, I'm sure, felt this way for a long time. But
I've always...
how about good for me for actually entertaining that thought?
You're gonna pat yourself on the back for saying they're all bad.
But considering that they might be good.
Well, that's even worse.
I didn't come.
I'd rather
into
you
this.
didn't. I'd rather you fought me this entire episode than come to
I,
that.
I did not. I came into this thinking there's no possible way they could be good. No way.
And again, I don't understand that. I don't understand that mindset.
And it was gut-wrenching to be confronted with the idea that they might be good. And it's funny because you could say this about any fucking movie, but take the problems away, and these movies are great. But there's a stubbornness to the problems that just, again, he gets in his own fucking way.
Yeah, but I mean, that's an inflated sense of how much the problems of a movie detract from it overall.
They do detract for me.
Yeah, but it seems to apply only to these big franchise movies that everyone has preset expectations about.
Okay.
And if you take that away, I mean, there's no way you can sort of you can enjoy Phantom Menace in its own right, because it is a Star Wars movie and because it has this history and it has this future. And
yeah, right.
You're seeing all that at once, like simultaneously. But it just kind of amazes me. And Phantom Menace I kind of get, because it's such a slow and disappointing start to the trilogy.
Mm.
If you want to think about it that way. But Attack of the Clones there's so much course correction that no one valued and no one saw. And I feel like there was an initial, like, in the first few days of its release, people really liked it, and then everyone stopped liking it almost simultaneously, like mass hypnotism.
And it's funny too, because it's the one movie out of the three, I won't say bombed, but it underperformed compared to the other two.
Yeah,
way less money.
Yeah. I don't understand it. But I can definitely argue they're both good movies in different ways. Yeah.
All right. Anything left before we